So welcome to adding rental affordable housing to your toolkit. That is not the title up here, and I recognize that if you walked in, you might have been like, am I in the right room? So you are absolutely in the right room. I'm Esther Carver. I am the Executive Director of the Lowell Community Development Corporation, and we work here in downtown Fresno in the Lowell neighborhood, which is just a neighborhood just outside of downtown. So on behalf of all of our residents in our community, welcome to Fresno. I also am the general manager. Lowell CDC is the general manager of the Central Fresno Neighborhood Trust. So that is the connection here. And we're going to be talking more about this mixed income neighborhood trust model and how we've launched it in Fresno and what it looks like and if it can work in your context too today. I'm excited. We have a panel of amazing, wonderful community members who are going to help talk through this. And then there's going to be a presentation, there's going to be a panel discussion, and then we're going to break into discussion groups. So hopefully, right before lunch, I know you guys might be hungry, but we'll keep this time moving. So we all walk away with some new ideas and hopefully inspired to go back to our communities. So I'm going to let my panelists introduce themselves today.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Jacqueline, and I am a resident at one of the CFNT properties.
And I'm Cristian Gonzalez. I serve as the CFNT Trust Stewardship Committee member, and I'm also a board member with Lowell CDC and a former renter in the Lowell neighborhood.
Hi, my name is Emily De La Guerra. I am one of the board members of the operating board for CFNT, also the CFO for Santa Clara County Housing Authority.
Thank you very much for the quick introduction. There's too many in the room right now to go around and introduce everyone, but I would like to know, maybe raise of hands, how many folks here today are representing a nonprofit organization? How many are representing a city or a county or an entity? How many are a private company or a development? Maybe a financial institution. Perfect. Did I get everybody? Did I miss anyone?
I probably am the only one. I'm from the state.
From the state.
Yeah.
Awesome. Wonderful. Well, welcome to everyone. I'm so glad you're here. I'm gonna jump into a presentation about our Central Fresno Neighborhood Trust and what a mixed income neighborhood trust model is, and then we'll get into the fun part of conversation. There we go. So let me roll back the clock just a little bit. In 2019 is when I started having conversations with a group called Trust Neighborhoods. And they're a nonprofit organization out of Kansas City. And we were connected through a funder of ours and a consultant said, hey, sounds like what you're doing could work with what this other group is doing. And so we got on a Zoom, and we have been Zooming once a week since 2019. So I have this whole other family in Trust Neighborhoods, which unfortunately none of their staff could be here today. One of their staff is getting married this weekend, and so that kind of put a kibosh on them traveling to be here in the Central Valley for this event. But they send their regards. So we started having this conversation of what is a mixed income neighborhood trust, and would it fit in our context? Would it fit in Central Fresno? And so it wasn't just the Lowell CDC. There's a group of CDCs and place-based organizations in Fresno, and so many of us were meeting with them and talking about this. And so in 2022, we launched and we created the Central Fresno Neighborhood Trust. It is the fourth mixed income neighborhood trust in the country, and we really work to develop and own affordable rental housing in perpetuity. So this is going to be long-term affordability. The goal really is to go into communities that are really at risk of displacement, at risk of really that investor coming in, taking a property, buying it, kicking all the affordable renters out, increasing the value a little bit, and then putting it back on the market to another demographic of folks. So here we are in Fresno. This is our neighborhood. I'm gonna let Christian talk a little bit about the community and where we're focused.
Yeah, so if you look at the map, our boundaries, the stewardship committee discussed, where do we want to be, right? We don't just want to be in Lowell, right? There's other communities that are nearby, and so we put some, we don't want to go above Shields, we don't want to go too south into downtown, right? And I think we were all also thinking all right, not past Palm, not past Chestnut, and so still very central. And so it includes here in Fresno, and at least in the work that we do, some neighborhoods have their own name, you think of the Tower, but every other neighborhood, and especially in our work, we give the neighborhood the name of the elementary school. So Jackson's in that neighborhood, Hidalgo, we think of Bernie, just to name a few.
Thank you. We really looked at what is the investment potential in downtown Fresno and in these neighborhoods, and why are they at risk for displacement? And what we see is we've got a lot of investment coming into downtown Fresno, right? We've got a train that we've been talking about for a long time. The state has invested money into infrastructure in our downtown areas, and I've lived and worked in the Lowell neighborhood now for almost 20 years, and over those 20 years have just seen significant change in our downtown development, in the demographic of folks that are coming and living and working and really utilizing downtown. And along with that, our downtown neighborhoods are changing. And so we're seeing that every day. We know that we need affordable housing. I'm not going to spend too much time here. We're all here. We're in the same room. And so the MINT model is an effective tool that helps us achieve this, to preserve affordable rents, provide quality housing, and build neighborhood accountability at the same time. And so this is really kind of the model that Trust Neighborhoods has come up with. It is really a portfolio that goes across a community. So it's not buying one building. It's not buying one block. It is purchasing multifamily housing across our communities. So we'll have a building here and a building there, and those buildings together are the portfolio. And within that portfolio, we can mix the incomes, and so that the higher incomes will help offset the cost of providing those lower incomes too. CF&T is alongside other mints delivering impact nationally. So these are the other neighborhoods across the nation that have implemented a mixed income neighborhood trust alongside a community partner in that area. So you can kind of see Fresno is one of these 5 cities, and it's growing all the time. And so there is a mint in 5 different cities, which is great. So we're going to dive a little bit more into our Fresno model now. Really, our hope is that every resident in our downtown area has access to long-term quality, affordable rental housing. And so our first phase is to get to 50 units. And so we launched in 2022. And we launched, we're gonna go more deeply into how that works here in Fresno with our governance committees, and our residents, and then also kind of the funding and the financing part of this as well. So really, this is our phase 1 scope. Our priority is to renovate without displacement. We're really targeting properties that are 2 to 8 unit properties, so not single family homes quite yet, and not a giant apartment complex either. Shifting power dynamics in the governance structure of it, so the community really has a voice and is part of the governing body. And then we're set up for scale without sacrificing that permanent affordability. So you can see here, there's some numbers on here as well. Really, we're targeting to be able to be all in on units. In the first few years, we were right between $140,000 and $180,000 per unit. Costs are going up, right? And so that is inching up as we move forward. And then the mix of income, right now in downtown Fresno, in our communities, 80% AMI is at sometimes higher than the market rate. And so we are 100% affordable. All of the first 50 units will be deed restricted because of some funding we received from the city. And so, but it is a mix of incomes. And over the portfolio, about 60% of the units will be at that 60% AMI or lower, and then 40% will be able to float up to that 80% AMI or market rate. Yeah. Here's what we own to date. So since 2022, we've been hard at work. There is 4 properties already in our portfolio that are across Fresno. 3 of them are almost fully occupied. We had some move out, so if you know anybody who needs a 1-bedroom apartment, let me know. So we have 3 properties that are almost fully occupied, and our little Divisadero house over there. If you're in Fresno, you might have driven by and seen it. It has been a vacant house for probably nearly 30 years with an illegal 3rd-story addition, and the back has been burned off of the building. So this is more of a long-term project for us. We have an architect working on it and a structural engineer and all of that. So hoping to send prayers and hopes for that one. For the governance structure here, we have 2 governing bodies to this entity. So one is our Trust Stewardship Committee. This committee is made up of community representatives. You can see here we have 5 people on this oversight committee. One is Christian, who serves as our Lowell CDC representative. She's a board member of Lowell CDC. She's filling that role. We have 2 community representatives and 1 renter representative. I also want to shout out Shara's in the room. She's also serving on our Trust Stewardship Committee right now. This committee has the voting power. They hold the voting power to vote on and off the operating board members, and then they have oversight for how to use some of the as the portfolio grows and it becomes profitable. Some of the profits get to be used back in the community, and this oversight, this Trust Stewardship Committee will hold the power to spend those dollars, either back in the community or on more properties, or they have the decision-making power over those profits. And then the operating board and the general manager work together to do the daily work of CF&T, to do the acquisitions and the renovations, and find the operating partners, the property management, all of that kind of stuff. So that's kind of how that works. We don't do this alone. Not alone. There is people that have come alongside and have been part of this work that are connected to and have affiliations with a lot of other organizations across our community. And so we are so grateful for the amount of people that have joined in and said, hey, we believe in this. This is a beautiful tool that we can use in our community that's going to change the trajectory of lives, and we want to be a part of it. So I just want to shout out to everybody who's involved. Here's a bit of our timeline and where we're at. We spent about a year and a half doing due diligence, meeting with community members. This was where our partnerships with other place-based organizations across Central Fresno was key. We did resident groups to talk about what are the holes in what are the holes that folks are falling through in the affordable housing like landscape in our neighborhoods, right? What are the challenges that folks have to finding or keeping affordable housing? What is happening with rents, what's happening in communities, and works to kind of address these things. Many of those residents wanted to be a part of the governance committee, so that is where two residents who were part of that like initial input meetings signed on to be part of the Trust Stewardship Committee as well. So that was really cool. And then we launched in 2022 with an initial investment from the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative and then a ARPA grant from the city of Fresno. And so here we are now in kind of go mode and getting this thing done and buying properties and renovating them. And we really plan to be done and completed with phase 1. Doesn't mean we'll be done. It means we'll be completed with phase 1 by the end of 2026. I'm gonna hand it over to Emily to talk a little bit more in depth about the financing.
Yeah, thanks. So for those of you who, the Mint model is something that's like, I think, interesting to kind of wrap your head around, especially for those of us who are in the nonprofit world and are really used to sort of financing projects on a project by project basis, right? But the Mint is different in that you are funding the trust, which then owns the portfolio of properties. So in the private sector, this is very similar to like a REIT, like a real estate investment trust, right? This is like the affordable version of a REIT, right? Where you're not, right? A REIT is to maximize profits, to generate returns for the investors. The Mint model is really to own the properties in perpetuity. You're not maximizing profits, you want some profit because then that gets reinvested back into the community, but it's also those profits help to provide affordable units, right, at a lower AMI level. So as Esther mentioned, the 80% units, the 60% units ends up helping subsidize some of the lower income units in the community. So this is kind of what our typical, our phase 1 capital stack looks like. And again, it's very similar to those of us who are in kind of, light-tech real estate or any other sort of real estate, but you have bank debt, right? We have a perm loan that comes in to help fund the trust. We have gap capital. These are grants that have been given to Lowell CDC or to the trust. And then we have our city grant that we received, and then the seed equity that we got from Chan Zuckerberg, which also came in as a grant to the organization. So again, it's very similar to how we finance projects in kind of the affordable housing development world. But again, I think the interesting thing about the Mint model is this is really funding the whole portfolio and then using those funds flexibly to then go and acquire all of the different sites.
I think that the one thing that I've learned in this work and why this model is unique is really we can take on investment dollars like PRIs, and those monies will get paid back eventually too, so that we're not just using grant dollars, but the grant dollars definitely help us go a lot farther. This is kind of digging a little bit deeper into how it can be funded. The Lowell CDC has taken on grants that then invest them into the trust. And so like the Lowell CDC will then, as a nonprofit entity, get returns on that investment. So it really works for the long-term sustainability of the organization that's serving the community as well, as it becomes profitable. We won't see those for a long time, yeah. Okay, so that kind of concludes our presentation point. I want to jump in here for our panelists to have a bit more discussion, and then we are going to have like some question time, and then we're going to like go into small groups too, and so we'll be able to interact. You'll be able to interact with our panelists and Shar, who's here as well, to talk more about the model and what it means there's more questions or what it means in your context. So right now, I would like you all to tell me a little bit more about Central Fresno. What makes it unique and who lives there? So I think I want to start with Christian and maybe Jackie to answer this question.
Yeah. So in Central Fresno, we have a mix of diverse people and ages and income, right? I think of moms with kids. I think of undocumented families. I think of I think one of our representatives on the trustee committee, he's a teacher, he's an entrepreneur, has his own business, right? Someone who cares about our community. So we have a mix. Even in that, there is a lot of properties, landlords who don't care about their tenants, right? And they're also in that mix of people. Yeah. Who would you add, Jackie?
That was exactly what I was thinking about. And then to build off of that, and I think that makes it unique because we all understand what it is like to have that background, which means we share in that struggle in our neighborhood, which helps us apply us voicing our needs. And I think that's what makes it unique, because no matter what our struggle was, it still brings us together to bring change and to bring programs like CFNT in.
Thank you. How does the governance boards work? And I'm going to have Christian and Emily, you guys talk a little bit about the different roles that the governance board that you serve on plays. What kind of decisions are you guys making? Yeah, tell us a little bit more about the Trust Stewardship Committee and then the operating board.
Yeah, so with the Trust Stewardship Committee, what's unique about what we get to do is we brainstorm and we're having conversations of, okay, we're acquiring this property. If we now have a tenant, what are the requirements? What's gonna allow them, if we wanna be in an agency that's taking away barriers for them to be able to access housing, then we're putting those parameters, right? And so one of our conversations was, okay, so if one of their windows gets broken by a rock, that it wasn't their fault, who pays for that? We're all like, well, we're gonna have to look at it by situation by situation. If it was done to them, then it's no, the tenant should not have to pay for that, right? We said, how long before, if this person is unemployed? Obviously, our whole goal is so that the individuals aren't displaced, right? That they're not unhoused. It's but we also have to be realistic, and it has to be sustainable. It's how we're working alongside. It's how long do we give them? Is it 3 months, 6 months? And so these are the decisions that the stewardship committee makes.
And I'm on the operating board, so the typical decisions that we are making is really around the financial and the operating metrics. So when we set up the portfolio and the trust, we really had targets that we were trying to achieve, both from a pre-development pro forma perspective, but then operating as well. And so we are really accountable for meeting those metrics on behalf of our lenders and our investors. So, we're reviewing budgets, we are looking at rehab contracts, we're looking at acquisition cost and looking at rehabs of properties. So really thinking about operations at both the property level and at the portfolio level, so we can make sure we're hitting our targets and our metrics for the overall portfolio health of the trust. I think one of the very interesting things, and this was new to me being on a mint board, was there really are these kind of checks and balances between the two boards. We have our own roles and responsibilities, but also we're there to, sorry, oh, wait, hold on, there we go. We're accountable to different things, right? The stewardship board is accountable to the residents, to the community, We're accountable to our lenders and our investors on the operating board, but we're also accountable to each other and are thinking about like, how is the other one going to decide and what are they worried about and how do we make sure that gets ingrained into the operations. And so really there's these checks and balances between the two boards to making sure we're kind of moving together in the same direction. So I think it's a really interesting concept. I've never had to I can't imagine for Esther trying to manage two different boards, like two responsibilities, but it's really super interesting about the MIP model.
Yeah, thank you. We're going to shift a little bit from kind of that technical side to the resident side. And Jackie, I want to ask you, like, what kind of barriers have you experienced throughout your life in accessing quality, affordable housing? And then tell us a little bit about your journey to a CF&T property and how that's been maybe a little bit different. And what barriers were there or were not there, and what's your experience been so far?
Okay, so we are obviously talking about affordable housing, right? So one of my biggest barriers is I come from a very low income family, as well as, which means as I grew up, I kind of remained low income. So one of the barriers as rental requirements are changing is that 3 times the rent, that the credit score, the renter's insurance, all these extra things that were not applicable when I was younger and I saw my parents renting. But another barrier was just something, on a personal matter that I took care of. So I was trying to look for a second chance on finding housing. So everyone was denying me, which now I'm still a statistic, right, as a homeless person. And so I learned about CF&T, and CF&T has created that chance to break that barrier, to allow myself the second chance to become one less number, right? And so, accessing this affordable housing as a single mom, as a single income, living with a medical condition as well. So the importance of this in my experience is when my health kind of takes a little bit of a toll, I can still afford where I live, And I think that is the greatest blessing there. So, yeah, it's been working.
Yeah, thank you. What are the biggest challenges that Central Fresno Neighborhood Trust faces in growth and impact? And what are some ways that those things might be able to be mitigated? And I'll ask this, to our operating board and our trust stewardship committee members.
Yeah, as we get together, capital funding is one of the biggest ones. It's we are competing on acquiring more properties from entities that can pay cash. And again, we are a nonprofit, right? We don't have stacks of money just laying around that we can buy cash, right? And again, we all know, if you're not familiar with Fresno, but we're getting people from the Bay, from Southern California coming in and buying. And so it's hard, as I think of becoming a homeowner, homeowners face that same challenge.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that one. I also think a lot of challenges right now, as Christian mentioned, especially in, I think, this area of Fresno, there are a lot of bad actors. Landlords that have just completely neglected their units, right? And that's how this affordable housing occurs, because it's substandard, it's low quality, and it's really painful to see people having to live in those conditions because that's all that they can afford. And I think, one of the challenges that we face is you can't get those bad actors to move on, right? And so I think there needs to be more pressure from our municipal partners, from your cities, from your counties, from your code enforcements to start putting pressure on some of these landlords to start to move on, and then feeling okay, I either have to invest in these properties and bring them up to compliance, or I have to sell, because without that pressure, they're just gonna sit there and pull in cash from, these families who just have no other options. And so I feel like there's like, at some point there's gotta be this political push to try and get these people to move on and these landlords to try and sell, which would help us achieve, right, I think some of our growth and impact, impact that we want to achieve in our community.
Yeah, thank you. I think that really sets us up for like, the next question is like, what is the vision, right? What does it look like? Paint us a picture of what this looks like in 3 to 5 years. What does CF&T look like in 3 to 5 years? What impact would you like to see it make in our neighborhoods, in our downtown neighborhoods?
I love this question. I think about this all the time and really thinking about like, for me, about scaling up, like how do we get to scaling up? Like 20 units is great, but I want to see like us at 20,000 units, right? Because I just think there's such a need in this community, and we need the capital, but we also need, and I know many of us know this too, but preservation is just going to be such an important aspect of the work that we're doing. If you're a nonprofit, if you're a funder, if you're a municipality, making sure that we can preserve units and not displace people. So I think, in 3 to 5 years, as the picture Esther showed, we own every other property on the block. And you see this like amazing mix of incomes where you have this like healthy and thriving community where teachers can live by their schools and they're walking to school next to their students, and you just really have this just thriving neighborhood where lots of different types of people can live and at all different incomes. So that's kind of the vision that I see for CF&T.
Yeah, as I being part of the stewardship committee, one of our goals that we'd like to see is having some of the tenants that are occupying the properties actually serve on the stewardship committee, right? So like hopefully once like housing being something that's so needed in our lives so that life can feel stable, like they found some stability, now they can like start and like being part of the community, and especially with this with the MIT model and CF&T, so it's like we're actually having 2 to 3 tenants from each property, right? And now they get to now that they have been like the ones experiencing the benefits of the CF&T, they can also add to the governance of it and how it could be improved and how we can create better. I loved Emily's picture for it. For me, it would be the vision of having our tenants more involved in the vision of continuing to build it.
I love that we're all so passionate about the same thing. No, and I think one of my biggest impacts that I would love to see with this is when my 2 words that come to mind is health and balance when you think of a neighborhood. And I would love to see that just take root and grow, because I want to hear more voices. I want creative voices to be heard, for needs to be met, for more diversity to come together. And I think that is what makes a whole neighborhood, instead of just sitting in the struggle together. I want to see it grow, children laughing, moms and parents feeling success, and just adding to that so that way we can have each other's back, hand to hand. So that's the impact that I can see, and I'm hoping for more. So.
It's beautiful. Thank you so much. I have one more question for you guys, and then I'm going to open it up for you all to ask questions of our panelists. I'm happy to jump in as well, and then we'll break into some roundtable discussions. The last question I have for you guys is how does a mixed income neighborhood trust fit into the broader mixed income housing strategy across Fresno, or maybe in another community too? How does it fit?
we can talk about this more maybe in some of the roundtable discussions. I feel like a mint is a tool. It is like one tool in our tool belt, right? And we talked a little bit, this session is like adding preservation to your toolkit, and this is one of the ways that you can do it. But there's other ways, like if you're from, one of our municipal partners, or thinking about this from a nonprofit, there's other ways that you can do it too, right? Mint is just like one structure that you could have. There's also a CLT, right? You have community land trust, and I know there's some sessions on that today. You could have sort of a fund where you're funding like a portfolio of properties. So there's lots of different ways that you can kind of do this. I think for the mint specifically, I think one of the things that are most attractive to it is that connection back to the community and that resident engagement, and that you have that kind of structure of accountability within the boards, and there is that community engagement. You're connected through the CDC or a strong partner that is already working geographically in that area. You have resident representation on the board, and you also have community representation on the board of people who live in the neighborhood. So it's people who are there, who are living there, who are already working in that neighborhood, and it really kind of holds you accountable to that specific geographic neighborhood. So I think it's a really great tool, but it is part of kind of this broader strategy that we all have to have around mixed income housing and making sure that there's affordability at all levels of income in your community.
Yeah, as I think of a lot of the Fresno maps, there's a map that we use a lot, and it's the concentrated poverty map here in Fresno. And our boundaries for CFNT fall under that, and it's red, right? And I think when I think of a healthy neighborhood, it's a mixed, socioeconomically mixed neighborhood, right? If people are already, in your words, Jackie, like in the same struggle, right? Concentrated poverty means not just Jackie is being harmed by poverty. I'm being harmed by poverty. It's like multiple families are being already burdened with poverty. So like if we continue to leave sprawl, right? Like we keep taking investment from like these central neighborhoods. So as you're creating a mint, it's helping recondition these properties, right? Instead of building new, like if you, as if you go back to the slides of the properties we've done, like Esther has gone in and renovated these and made them quality housing. These were like in horrendous conditions, right? And there's a lot of properties within our in our boundaries that look this way, like this. Property owners do not care, right? And there's no dignity for the people who live there, and like we need to do better. It's like they're still collecting money and they're still raising rents, and it's like, hey, you like what you're saying, keeping them accountable of like either get rid of this property, right? Donate it to a CDC, because that contributes to the problem of continuing this vicious cycle of keeping people in poverty and like just these neighborhoods deteriorating instead of remaining there, being able to make them better.
Yeah, thank you. There's so many stories that I would love to share with you all too. And I'll share one tiny little story before I start asking your questions. But just to this point, as we were, White was our first property that we went in, and this green grass there was not there when we bought it. And we worked through Easter break with one high school. They brought a bus of high schoolers in to help us recreate a fence, and then 2 different churches came with their high school groups, and we re-landscaped the whole place. And our construction crew that I worked with for quite a while was in and out and, dodging kids as they're like, trying to like renovate our units. And one of the guys goes, Esther, how long do you think this is all gonna last before it gets ripped out? And I go, I don't know, Miguel. But he goes, what are you gonna do when it all gets ripped out? I said, I'm gonna replant it. And he goes, and then what are you gonna do when it gets ripped out again? I said, I'm gonna replant it. And he goes, and I go, eventually they'll stop ripping it out. And the next day, when we showed up to continue our work, we had 2 neighbors, one in a single family home and one in a rental property. And they were out, the single family home one was out sitting on a little chair picking weeds out of the median, not the median, the park strip, right? So outside of her yard. And the other guy at the apartment complex had found a rake somewhere and was raking up leaves. And Miguel comes walking in, and I go, Miguel, and he goes, yeah. And I go, hey, look at what's happening. I go, look at our neighbors. And he like looks down the street, and I go, this is what's gonna happen. I said, no one has invested in this street in a really long time. But there's excitement because something's happening and it's making this street better. All the street trees on that street, except one, I counted them, have died. Has the city of Fresno replanted any street trees on that street? No. So what did we do? We called them up and said, hey, we own a property. We need you to replant some street trees. There's 2 baby trees on that street, and hopefully there'll be more, right? So those are like the little things that we see happening at our properties. This one doesn't look like this anymore. I wish I had a better picture of it. It looks way better than that. So we're gonna open it up for some questions from the tables, and then what we're gonna do is we're gonna break up into tables based on like, if you wanna know more about like the community engagement side and the resident like buy-in and maybe the trust stewardship committee and how that works, you're gonna be at one table. If you wanna know about like the financing or like how this thing like works, how you build one, we're gonna have another table. So we're gonna split up and then we'll kind of walk through some discussion. So anybody have any questions for our panelists? Don't Michelle.
I have a question for you. You said hit you up if you have anyone who's wanting to rent one bedroom. Okay, how do we hit you up?
Perfect. I have lots of business cards. I will leave them up here towards the end. So come get a business card.
Hi, everyone. So I'm trying to wrap my head around how this is different than a CDC or a CHODO. So is it the trust aspect of it? And like, can you explain how the trust makes it different than those 2 others?
Yeah. Yeah, so a CDC, we're a 501c3 nonprofit, okay? So we're right here, we have an operating board for Lowell CDC, and we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization. CF&T is an LLC that is buying property. The LLC has a perpetual purpose Delaware trust attached to it, okay? So the LLC will be affordable, like the properties will be affordable forever because of the perpetual purpose trust. It has to always do what the trust has set forth to do, right? If it ever stops doing that purpose, then the trust stewardship committee, right, comes in, fires the operating board, says you have to abide by the purposes of this trust. And the purpose is twofold. One, to be profitable in the sense of like, we gotta pay our bills, right? So it's got to run in the black, it can't be running in the red. And 2, it's gonna provide affordable housing to the residents of Central Fresno forever and ever. So it's dual purpose. Thank you. Yes.
So I just wanted to ask what your major sources of funding are, and then also what is the selling point to your investors? Because I know for most investors, like with the nonprofit, if you're doing the right thing, it's a tax credit. So for you guys, for investors who want to be involved, and you're trying to keep rents affordable with perpetuity, what's your selling point?
So the trust will take all types of financing, right? We have typical capital stack, we don't do tax credits, but we do equity, right? In return, in exchange for returns to that investor. So we do negotiate returns, and typically they're like below market. So we take equity financing. It could be like through a PRI investment, which is a program-related investment from a foundation where you're typically paying like 2 to 3% back to them. It could be through below market loans from like nonprofits or CDFIs. And that again is like at a lower rate of like typically I think 5 to 6%. We've been seeing things, there's some preservation funds that are starting to come up that we're looking at potentially using where it's just straight debt. And then the trust would be paying that debt back through the profits of the property, right? And then grants and public dollars as well. So we've gotten funds from the city. We originally started with a $1 million seed grant from CZI, and all of that is then put into a capital stack like a typical real estate like project deal, but we are kind of managing that at the portfolio level. And so understanding that, we have to take profits from multiple properties, right, and make sure we can pay that debt. It's the operating board really making sure, right, we're meeting our NOI requirements so we can pay that back, and any equity investments that we're getting as well. And then there was a second question.
The selling point to the investor.
The selling point to the investor. I think there's a lot. I mean, maybe investor, you want to take that?
So the investors we've been talking to recently have been investors that have like a bucket of like investment money that they want to go to something really good, right? Like that purpose, right? They want to invest with a purpose. And so that's kind of like the investor. It's not just any investor, because we're not going to give you the biggest returns on your investment. Like go find something else, right? It's not this. We're not, it's social, thank you. Like a social impact investor, right? So we just got BDT to come in. I don't know if that name rings a bell with anybody, but Kavya, our Trust Neighborhoods team is so much better at names and like which big rich family is connected to BDT. I don't remember. Anyway, so they just gave us $400,000, right? And that money is like, pay this back. So we'll have to pay it back. I think we have it for either 5 years or 10 years. I need to know these things. So say it's 5 years. I think it's a 5-year loan. And really, we will pay that back in a balloon payment, like when we refinance in 5 years. And if the trust is making profits between now and 5 years, we'll pay them a percentage of those. We'll start paying back that loan at a percentage of our profits, right? So they will get their money back eventually, but they're not interested in a massive kickback. Yeah. Any other questions before we?
So how do you manage the operating and maintenance and rehab costs while this is?
All this is scaling? We're trying to figure that out right now. It looks like Esther has a lot of tools in her truck, and she runs around a lot. That's a really great question. So we are pushing to get to our first 50 units as quickly as possible. So I would say that grant dollars have been great. The Lowell CDC has been able to bring in additional grant dollars that kind of like just help us do this stuff that doesn't go through CF&T finances at all, because we're the boots on the ground doing the work. And some, great foundations have said, hey, we love what you're doing. Let's support the Lowell CDC. So I would say right now, the Lowell CDC has gotten some grant dollars that we're just paying staff to do some of this stuff. We have contracted with a property management company to kind of do the property management, but what we've found is nobody is property managing like we would like to property manage. See smiles. Okay.
So you have no in-house operations or maintenance or
So
handy guy?
within a month we will.
Yeah.
So we have just launched, I can say we've launched it because it's actually an LLC now. So Lowell CDC has just launched Hogar Property Services, which will be our management arm, okay? And then we'll negotiate with CF&T to take on management of all of those properties, as well as, hopefully other properties as well. So if y'all know property managers and have expertise in this area, come hit me up. We are building this as we go. Lowell CDC has owned and managed our own 3 single-family homes in the neighborhood for 10 years now, so it's not like we don't have experience doing this. We do, it's just me. And now it's Chris, who's our one staff member who's helping me do this stuff. So, so we have been small, we know how to do it. We are highly relational. And that we know as we scale is gonna be really hard to maintain. But we truly believe that property management holds this key role. And nobody is property managing like we would like them to be. And so we are at our properties every single, I would say day, it's week, for sure. We're at our properties every single week and having eyes on the ground, communication with tenants, that sort of thing. And then the maintenance thing, we've worked with several different contractors to really, just sit down and we've found really mission-aligned contractors, which has been really great. And so, I had another conversation last week with my contractor and I was like, look, I want to support you and what you're doing, but your prices are coming in a few $100s ahead of other prices consistently. I can't pay you to do this. And he's like, okay, what can we do? So those things are happening all the time too. Yeah, can I add?
I'll just add to that too. Esther mentioned this, but scaling up is so important for us to be able to get those economies of scale. And I think it's interesting that as we scale up, the properties that we've bought along the way have been pretty affordable, right? And we also have a commitment of that we're not going to displace people when we come into a property and buy it. So we can get a higher income, because the way the trust works out, it has to be that mix of incomes to have the higher rents kind of help subsidize the lower rents. Right now it's kind of all a little bit lower rents, and so we're hoping that as kind of properties come up and as we start to scale and there's vacancies and turnover, that we can start to achieve those higher expenses that then helps us, continue to pay operations, help us be profitable, pay some of those returns to investors. So I think that's one of the next goals that we're working on and is really important for us from a sustainability perspective, is to have that mix of incomes within the portfolio.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask you guys to move around a little bit. So if you're interested in kind of resident engagement, maybe the trust stewardship committee, I'm gonna ask you to move to this side or this table over here. If you're interested in getting into the nitty gritty of how does an LLC and a perpetual purpose trust and a 501c3 and how do you get financing, come over this way. I'd love to hear if there are any other kind of topics that you want to kind of get into or thoughts. How does this work in your neighborhood? Would it work in my neighborhood? That sort of thing. Any other thoughts? Okay, so we're gonna divide. We can do 2 or 3 tables, 4 tables. But yeah, go this direction. Emily and I will come to this side of the room, and we'll have Christian, Shar, and Jackie